please. So thank you so much for attending our first community meeting for the task force as we work through thinking about rezoning and equity. And with us tonight is a great team of people who will be available to help answer your questions. Throughout the evening, we will stop a number of times and ask you to raise your questions. We also have the Q&A function on. And so if you are not used to Zoom, go to the bottom of your screen and there's a little button that says Q&A. And as we go through the evening, we will answer as many questions as we can in Q&A, but at various times we will be stopping and asking you to raise your hands, at which point we will unmute you and ask you to verbally contribute as well. So we are really excited about having everyone here tonight, having great attendance, and delighted to be with you. And on that note, Sarah, I will go ahead and turn it to you and the fabulous CPD team.
Hi, thank you, Rox. So we're actually going to go ahead and introduce city staff, and then we'll pass it off to Laura Aldrete to say a few words. So I'm Sarah Forrest. I'm the project manager for this project, work with community planning and development and planning services. And I'll pass it off to Liz to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. I'm Liz Weigel. I'm the rezoning planning supervisor. So I work closely with our rezoning team, and I'm also part of the project team. So great to see you all. And I'll pass it off to Kyle.
Good evening. I'm Kyle Dalton. I'm Denver's regulatory planning manager in the Department of Community Planning and Development. Andrew.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Kyle. My name is Andrew Webb. I am the rezoning or map amendments team lead, and I'm also a project team member, and I will pass the mic on to Rob.
And hello, my name is Rob Haig. I'm an associate city planner with CPD. I'm also a member of the rezoning team and a member of the project team. Thanks for being here. And I will pass it off to Jenna.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenna Morton. I'm a communications specialist with CPD, and I do communications for this project. And I'm going to pass it back off to Sarah.
Perfect, thank you. And we'll just keep passing it off. So at this point, I would love to have Laura Aldrete say a few words. She is our executive director of community planning and development. So Laura, if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks everybody. I don't know if everybody else got to hear the music that I heard in waiting, but it was fantastic, especially at 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm still in the office. So whoever had that brain child, good job, keep it up. And I want to thank everybody else for joining. Community members, you are why we are here, right? We are here for ensuring that we've got good input and we're hearing and listening to the community and helping us draft and work towards improving our city and certainly our zoning through your voices. So I want to thank you for that. My name is Laura Aldrete. I am the Executive Director of Community Planning and Development with my team here this evening. And our work tonight's really going to be focused on updating the city's rezoning process. And I look forward to hearing your perspectives as not just this evening, but it'll be an ongoing opportunities to hear from all of you. As many of you know, equity is a key goal to the city of Denver as expressed in our city comprehensive plan, and implementing improvements, excuse me, that integrate equity into all that our department does is one of my top priorities as an executive director. This project is about rezonings and is especially important for our communities. When the property owner requests to change their zoning district, it's usually because they want the ability to do something different on their property. And that might, they might want to change the type or the size of the building allowed. They might want to change how that building can be used, like making it from commercial instead of residential. So that would be a change of use. Certainly we think a lot about, or oftentimes as we see in our neighborhoods or in our city, height, right? Would be another example of that, those rezoning changes. And projects like these, can bring in new homes, new jobs, and services to a neighborhood, which are really important and we want, and that's important for, for cities to continue to be healthy, is to evolve, but we also want them to evolve in a way that is respectful of our history, of being cognizant of the context of where we are building. But it can also leave people feeling excluded from the changes in their neighborhood, right? If you have lived in that neighborhood a long time, it can feel like this sudden change happens without any kind of participation. So this project is really an opportunity to improve upon that. When rezoning is proposed, there's an opportunity to consider how our neighborhoods are going to evolve and how we achieve those long-term goals put in place by our plans. We believe this process can be easier for our communities to understand and participate in. And as I mentioned, right, that's how we are driven. It can be more accessible and transparent. And when we're all at the table, better outcomes, we believe better outcomes will be a result. So though we've made small changes to the rezoning process in the past, we believe this is an opportunity now to have a comprehensive look at how rezonings unfold and how they can be improved. And I really look forward to hearing your voices and working together on this project over the next year. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah Kars and the project team to give more detailed overview of the Advancing Equity in Rezoning project. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So before we begin, I also want to do a quick shout out to some other people. We have a task force that we've convened of about 25 members. And I want to call out that some of them are attending tonight. We really appreciate the work that they've put in. But I also want to thank our 2 city council members that are on the task force as well. We have Amanda Sandoval, who is a councilwoman for District 1 in Northwest Denver. And we also have Stacey Gilmore, who's a councilwoman for District 11 as city council president. So there are representatives on our task force. We also have 2 planning board members I'd like to thank, Aaron Clark and Joel Noble, who have also been participating. And I know for sure Joel is joining us tonight. So on that note, I will share my screen and go through a brief presentation. If you give me 1 second. Perfect. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen at this point. Thank you for all the introductions. Again, my name is Sarah Kors. I'm the project manager for this project, and we are all here for the first community meeting for the Advancing Equity in Rezoning project. So what will we cover today? There's going to be 3 main components of the meeting. We've already done some introductions. Next will be an overview of the project. And then we'll review the draft issues to address, as well as move into discussing draft goals to achieve so far, with an opportunity for questions and discussions after each. So why are we here? Why is the city doing this project to update the rezoning process? First, we recognize that the city is evolving, development and change is happening, and we've heard from community members like yourself that some improvements could be made, especially to the rezoning process. Second, citywide goals need to be implemented. In 2019, we adopted new citywide plans that set the vision, priorities, and goals for Denver. These plans also provide guidance for land use and future development. As we consider how the city is evolving, we look to see what's in our plans and what projects should be prioritized to achieve our citywide goals, especially the goal of creating a city that is equitable, affordable, as well as inclusive. And then third, the rezoning process is essentially outdated. The citywide plans I just mentioned identified this project as a priority because the rezoning process could be updated. There are more rezonings getting denied, potentially because of conflicts with review criteria. There's also more applicants having a difficult time navigating the process. And there are also people showing up wanting to be a part of the process, but are just not feeling heard. So there are 2 plans I want to discuss. The first is the comprehensive plan, which is a 20-year vision for Denver. It has 6 vision elements, and the first vision element is the goal for Denver to be equitable, affordable, and inclusive. The second plan is Blueprint Denver, which provides future land use and transportation guidance. This project, as well as all city projects, look to those citywide plans and aim to achieve their goals. Blueprint Denver also defines equity, and it says that equity is when everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from, have the opportunity to thrive. This plan also identifies specific goals related to equity, including the 3 equity concepts that should be integrated into every project. And they are improving access to opportunity, reducing vulnerability to displacement, and expanding housing and jobs diversity. So there are recommendations from this plan that essentially led to the project that we are here to discuss today. So this project may not be a visionary planning project, but instead it's a regulatory project intended to help implement the goals already identified in our plans. The outcome will be an update, also known as a text amendment, to the Denver Zoning Code, a very large regulatory document. And the main question that we're here today and that we'll try to solve with this project is, how should the rezoning process change? We want you to contribute to this project to provide your expertise, experience, and perspective, and to help us solve this question. But one thing that we'll reiterate throughout this project is that it's about the rezoning process. However, to understand the rezoning process, we must understand the role of zoning and the difference between the two. Zoning controls what you can or cannot do with your property or zone lots. It controls how tall buildings can be, their general location, or other things such as parking. And it also controls transparency or windows, entrances, and other design standards. And it also controls uses within the building or on the site. So that was a very quick overview of zoning. So that was zoning. Then here's a quick overview of rezoning. The rezoning is the process of changing the zone district of a property. For example, this property that's zoned to allow a residential duplex could rezone to allow a 3-story building with retail on the first floor and potentially office on the upper floors. Again, a rezoning is to go through the process of changing zone districts of a property. And a rezoning may occur for a variety of reasons. Applicants may request to rezone their property into a zone district that may allow accessory dwelling units. It could allow a change in height, or there may be a request for a change in use, or maybe a reduction in the minimum zone lot size. Whatever the request is, we know that there's a variety of zone districts that we have across the entire city today. And if you'd like to look up a zone district for a property, the city's website has a really good resource for that. It has an interactive map with all the zoning within the city. And I'd like to just say that we don't have enough time today to cover all the details about what zoning is, as well as a thorough overview of the rezoning process. So we highly recommend that you visit the city's webpage, as well as the project's webpage, to learn more about zoning and the rezoning process. We also have some videos that explain zoning, which we're calling it the Zoning 101 and Rezoning 101. And we have those videos online as well on the project webpage. So going back to the project, overall, the purpose of this project is to evaluate the existing rezoning process as well as criteria to understand how they may be modernized and better advance Blueprint Denver's equity concepts. More specifically, this project will focus on updating the rezoning process so that it is transparent, equitable, and accessible for all, identifying rezoning review criteria that inform better decisions and achieve citywide goals, including goals related to equity, and creating requirements that respond to the varied equity impacts of rezonings. So there may be 3 main areas that we can consider that our project has an impact on. The first is our project can provide updates to the rezoning requirements and materials. This may include updates to application requirements, how and when community engagement occurs, or things like updates to notification requirements, which are notifications to community members to make them aware of current rezonings. This project can also evaluate and update the review criteria. The review criteria are a very important piece to the rezoning process. They are defined in the Denver Zoning Code, and the review criteria are what city staff, planning board, as well as city council use to evaluate a rezoning request. And again, the evaluation includes determining whether the rezoning request meets all 5 of the review criteria. So this project could update the review criteria, that important aspect. Lastly, this project could address concerns regarding equitable outcomes and kind of frame some of the outcomes that we're looking for around rezonings. In terms of this project and the schedule, this project is anticipated to be about a year long, kicking off this winter with hopes to wrap up the project by next winter. And there is a task force that I mentioned that's about 25 members, and the task force is anticipated to meet monthly throughout the first 6 phases of the project. You can observe those meetings if you like, and all the meeting materials are also posted to the project's webpage if you want to get up to speed on what's being discussed. In addition to that, we plan to have a variety of opportunities for engagement during phases 2 through 6. So there have already been a few task force meetings as well as focus group meetings to get the conversation started on analyzing and identifying the problem, which that's also what we'll discuss today. So here are a few ways you can stay engaged throughout the project. We plan to have at least 3 community meetings, this one today, as well as other ones that may occur in summer and fall. There will be focus groups with a few coming up this month. If you're interested, please fill out the interest form online. And we'll also have a reminder at the end of the meeting about how to get involved with the focus groups. There will be office hours scheduled, which will be designated times for anyone to come in and to talk to the project team about the project and ask questions. And there's also several different ways that you can submit feedback to the project team, which is through the project website right now. And lastly, there will be other opportunities such as submitting feedback through surveys and other things like that. So now I'm going to stop here and turn it over to Rox for a few questions.
Great. And if anybody couldn't see that website, Sarah, can you just tell people the website name again, both for signing up for focus groups and getting involved?
Yeah, so the website, I'll say it out loud, it's www.denvergov.org/equity and rezoning. And we'll try to put that in chat as well eventually.
Equity and rezoning is the place at the city and county website. And now that you know a little bit about this project, before we go into some of our remarks, we want to know a little bit more about we have a little over 30 people who are here. We had about 80 signups, so we're delighted that more people have been able to join us so far. We hope people will continue to join us throughout the evening. And just a reminder, we have questions can be asked in the Q&A function. That's where we're taking questions tonight, so that we don't have chat and the Q&A going. It's in the Q&A section. And Sabrina, could you give us the poll and tell us how to do the poll so that Sarah and the staff can understand better who's in the room tonight?
Absolutely. And like Rox said, thanks everyone for being here. So I am launching a poll now. It should pop up automatically on your end. It's just in Zoom, so you don't have to go to any outside site. I've just launched it. There are 3 questions. The first 2 questions are actually the same question. It's just asking about why you are here. So you can check things like I'm a Denver resident who owns my home, I'm a nonprofit developer, etc. So those first 2 questions are just getting your kind of demographic background. And the third is asking about how familiar you are with the rezoning process and review criteria in Denver. So it looks like we're getting a few responses already. We'll leave this open for a couple minutes so everyone has a chance to respond. And as Roxanne said, if you are having trouble accessing the poll or have questions for the panelists, you can use the Q&A function, which is on the bottom bar of your screen to the right of raise hand.
So it's great. We're so glad that as we go through this process, we have a really diverse task force. Plus, we have already started and had 2 focus groups, and then we are having about 4 to 6 additional focus groups in multiple languages as well, if desired, for people who have experienced zoning, people who have rezoning, people who have experienced the impacts of rezoning, and people who are trying to do more work in Denver. And as Sarah said earlier, this is the first of several community meetings. We'll also be doing a survey as we get further along, because we know that zoning and rezoning really impacts how we feel about our neighborhoods. And that impacts how we feel about our homes and where we live and how we feel as residents and of Denver. So thank you all so much for answering this. It looks like we have a number of renters on. We have a number of homeowners. We have a couple of people who own multiple properties. We don't have any nonprofit developers, but we did have a focus group that had a number of those in the room. We have a land use planner, we have business owners, we have a number of people who are equity advocates. Thank you in particular for being here. We have a number of people who are interested in the impacts of rezoning and really concerned about anti-gentrification and displacement. Affordable housing advocates. Yes, we need more affordable housing in Denver. I'm sorry, that was editorializing. That's clearly where I'm at too. An open space advocate. And we have people, as we have on the task force, who have a wide range of experience with zoning and rezoning. From some of you who have done a rezoning, to those of you who have participated, wow, a bunch of you who have watched a planning board or city council review of zoning, and many of you who have participated in the rezoning process before. So knowing that we have a lot of you who know a lot about zoning, we will try to make certain that our remarks help both people who aren't as familiar, as well as people who, as you know, are on the planning board and here are with us as well. Because it's oftentimes in that dialogue between the groups that we understand what's missing and what is our misconnect between people who may speak a lot of the zoning code legalese and people who are saying, gosh, I just want to know how this impacts my neighborhood. And could you speak in plain English, plain language, I should say, that is easier for me to understand. So we need to be able to bridge both gaps. And Sarah, it looks like you've got a pretty good diverse group here tonight. So thank you again for participating in that and for being in the room tonight. And we would like to do next is move on to the project overview. So Sarah, will you, Sabrina, can you stop sharing the poll? And then let's move to the draft issues to address.
Perfect, thank you. So give me one more second. I will share my screen again. All right, so hopefully you see my screen again. So thank you so much for Rox and for everyone for doing that quick poll. It helps us to really learn who's in the room and who we need to talk to and also what other information we need to get out there as well. So let's discuss the draft issue identification. What I'll present is only a draft of the issues that have been heard so far, and they will be updated to incorporate additional feedback that we hear from you tonight, as well as surveys and focus groups that we'll have this month as well. So I'll be going through the main themes of feedback we have heard so far and the more specific issues associated with those themes. So after I go over these, we would love to hear your feedback on the issues that have been identified and also what we may be missing. So keep that in mind as I go over this. If there's something that you feel we're missing or other feedback you want to provide, you'll have an opportunity to do that right after this. So the first theme that we're hearing in terms of issue identification is around public awareness. Some of the issues that have been identified include noticing requirements that do not necessarily seem to be equitably accessible, and they also use very technical language. The next is the fact that review criteria and the process are sometimes very difficult to understand. There's also inadequate language access, including things like translation and interpretation of materials, like the rezoning materials or application or notifications and things like that. And notifications to registered neighborhood organizations do not necessarily reach a diverse range of people, and there could be a lack of representation from the community on that specific, within that specific organization. The second theme is consideration of public input. It's perceived there are insufficient requirements for public engagement, so engagement involved within the rezoning process itself. There may be varying public input including input that differs from guidance and adopted plans, or that differs from citywide goals as well. And there's this idea that public hearings are not necessarily the best format, and that there is a lack of understanding of how input is even used during that process. The third theme is the process for applicants. It's seen that it's not ideal that the rezoning process is the same for everyone, including the same for all types of applicants or all types of rezonings. The application and process itself can be unclear to people, especially people who are inexperienced with the rezoning process. And this may create a potential barrier for those that would like to pursue a rezoning. And lastly, the process itself can be difficult as well as have unpredictable outcomes. The fourth theme is the review criteria. The review criteria don't necessarily identify how public input should be used or evaluated. And on top of that, it also doesn't necessarily clearly consider equity impacts or how is that evaluated or part of the review criteria. And the other idea that some of the criteria are maybe unclear or a bit vague. And then the fifth theme is around equitable outcomes. It's seen that the tools to evaluate equity are not used on all rezonings, and that's an issue. There's development proposals that are not part of the rezoning process, which could contribute to unclear impacts in terms of the outcome of potential rezoning. And there's this idea that there are some agreements associated with rezonings, but many are done privately and may not include an equity lens. There's potentially a lack of commitments from applicants, so those seeking to rezone a property. There's this idea that there could be other commitments that come along with that. And lastly, that the rezoning fees are not necessarily equitable. So that was a summary of 5 general themes that we've been hearing with specific issues associated with them. And I'd like to pause and we'll ask you a few questions through a survey using a software called Mentimeter. So if you give me 1 second, I will stop sharing and I will share the information for the survey.
Great. And as we do that, we're asking people to respond with your initial sense of the draft issues and how you feel about them. If we, as we've gone through this process with the task force and our first focus groups, whether or not you think we're in the ballpark. Do you agree that we have identified the main issues that the project should address? Not the outcomes, we got a long ways to go for that, not the recommendations, but the issues we should address going forward. So if you were able to see the screen, it is there. It's menti.com and the code is 2936 2226 if you aren't able to see it. So again, the code, it's menti.com 2936 2226. Tonight, we are only working in English. We do have the ability to also work in other languages. Just ask that people sign up with a language request 3 days in advance. We'd love to have this happening in multiple languages, as well as the materials are being translated in English and Spanish. So that's your first slide, and I see that a few people are starting to answer it. And we'll just give you a couple more minutes to respond to that. And then we're going to move to a next slide where we're going to ask an open-ended question about the process and gather your input that way. But if you have a chance to go to menti.com and then enter code 2936 2226. We've got about a third of you having had a chance to answer so far. And there is a reminder, if you have questions, you can go to the Q&A function and staff can help you there. So just to give you a sense, the first poll we did, we had about 25 of you able to answer. We understand that you may be also trying to juggle a child tonight, or you may not have the access to devices, that sort of thing. At this point, we have about 15, about half of you answered. So we'll give you another minute or two to answer. If you're able to, that's great. And we're seeing that folks are, some people are disagreeing. We don't have anybody strongly disagreeing yet. We have one person who thinks we've hit the sweet spot so far. And then about 13 of you who are, well, you're getting there. After we go to our next question, we'll have a chance for you to ask some more questions, which maybe some of you are thinking, I don't know yet. I don't know whether I agree or disagree because I have questions. And so part of what we're looking at is, does the material stand on its own yet? And seeing that we've got some work to do, which is great feedback. Okay, I think, Sarah, let's go ahead and go to the next question. Thank you so much, folks, for your feedback. And thinking about the issues to address, is there anything we missed? And I see that some of you have already started to fill that in, which is fabulous. And asking questions about climate change, improving transportation, making the process simple so that small developers can help, how rezoning promotes the work. And if you're watching the screen, you can see that it is changing as fast. Whereas the BIPOC representation here, that's a good question. We do have some diversity that you may or may not be able to see. We also had some team members who couldn't be here tonight. It's been a real concern at the task force level as well. Equitable housing coming up again. Making the website easier to use. We have heard that a couple of times, so thank you. Equity across all of the city, not just in some neighborhoods. Specifics about how rezoning promotes equity. So helping make the dots connect even more. So keep following the neighborhood plans as we think about rezoning, but also neighborhood plans and more equity. Great. We'll give you another minute or so to keep filling this out because this is so helpful for us as we go back to our task force. And we have a number of task force members on tonight who are listening and who we will be leaning on to report out at our next meeting about what all they heard as well tonight. And to help the task force think about how we take your input and make it better. Okay, we're going to give you about 30 more seconds. So if you want to type in your final answer. People have questions about, the overall process, knowing that if you go from the CPD staff up through the process to the planning committee to city council, how are we ensuring representation at each level? Okay, let's close that out, Sarah. And if you'll come off screen, sure, we'll have a chance to ask some questions. We've got a few minutes. We should be able to take at least 5 or 6 questions. So if you want to raise your hand, and if you don't know how to do that in Zoom, go to the bottom of your screen and there's a raise hand function. If you raise your hand, then Sabrina and Yvonne will promote you. And from there, you'll be able to speak your questions. So do we have any questions? All right, it's a quiet group tonight. Yes, Gregory Holmes will promote you and you have also shared some resources earlier tonight with the CPD staff, so thank you. Mr. Holm?
Yes, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. So what I would like to ask is if in the rezoning process, part of the discussion is the way in which neighborhood groups like R&O over the last few decades have used their position to prevent the construction of multifamily housing. And they've, the way they've been able to interact with the zoning code and how that interaction, as described in a book called Neighborhood Defenders, has significantly contributed to the shortage of housing in Denver as well as the cities all across the country. Because I think R&Os have had an inordinate amount of power in the process. And I think that needs to really be addressed in how much weight those opinions are being given in rezoning requests. Thank you.
Yeah, I can start off and then pass it off to any other city staff that would like to answer it. So I think that is one issue that we've also heard from other community members is kind of that understanding of the role of community members, including R&Os and things like that. So we would like to look into how community input is used as part of this process. And I think that's great feedback for us to hear as well. So that I think is definitely something we'll look into. So thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Judy Baxter, and then Robert Schmidt, and then Joan. So Sabrina, if you'd start with Judy, then we'll go to Robert and Joan and Mary Ann, and then we'll probably be out of time.
Yeah, great. Thank you for doing this. Sorry, I joined a little late, but I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's here and working on this. To the R&O issue, my question is, and I know that the place and strength of voice and how the voice is done over the last, I don't know, 20, 40 years here in Denver. It's also under discussion, but as president of an R&O and working with issues and working with the city to try to keep the neighborhood even just informed, it's also really challenging to figure out how to tap in to make sure you have a diverse and inclusive viewpoint on any given issue. To reach my neighbors is really hard. And so I'd love some help actually, and some thinking and some resources. And I'm probably better trained than most people are about thinking about these things, but I don't have the resources to figure out how to do a decent survey and get it out to people and figure out how to pull in that opinion. It's just really hard. And even when you want to be in the right place, you want to have that inclusive, including the diversity of opinion that might be sitting out in your neighborhood and getting those voices heard. It's really hard to figure out how to do it. And how to speak responsibly if you are called upon at city council or whatever. So I just really hope you attend to supporting those you're asking to help in this venture, to give them the tools and not just lip service to pulling it off. So that's from the R&O perspective, who wants to actually really be inclusive, but it's hard.
Thanks, Judy. I know the task force has been thinking a lot already about RNOs, and it's a good perspective of how might we support them. Sarah, anything else you want to add in terms of answering that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great comment, and an issue everyone faces as well is how can we be more equitable, more inclusive, hear from everyone, get the voices that we want to hear from as well. And hopefully you can reach out to city staff and we can provide the resources we can. And hopefully, if there's city council members, I don't know exactly where your R&O is and what council districts might be in, but sometimes city council members can be helpful with that, with getting the word out as well.
Great. Thank you again, Judy. Robert? And then after that, we will go to Joan and Mary Ann.
Yes, I would just like to give another perspective to the point that was brought up by the first person who talked about RNOs. And I think that Andrew Webb can, he's had experience and can probably agree with this. I'm on my RNO's zoning and planning committee, and I'm also the delegate of our RNO on the INC zoning and planning committee. And the groups that we're involved with have a diverse collection of opinions and ideas and inputs that come into various matters. And as much as someone may feel that RNOs wield an exorbitant amount of power to direct development in certain directions, both in policy and geography, I would probably say there's an equal amount of people that feel that RNOs are not paid enough attention by the city planning department. And I've heard that numerous times from various members of the zoning and planning committees that I'm on. So I would say from my 5 years of experience of being involved with these two groups, is that what it comes down to in our analysis of projects is also based on what is written in the various plans, both the comp plan and blueprint, and making sure that for everybody who's involved, whether they're someone who owns a home, they're a renter, they're a multifamily, or they're a business owner, that whatever the proposed project that comes along, that it is carefully studied with regards to the two plans that we have to work with and the existing zoning to make sure that what is being proposed is not overtly disruptive to the neighborhood context in which it's going into. And we try very hard to work towards that and make sure that where projects are going, where they'll do the most good in being able to connect with mass transit and commercial centers and things like that to promote more walkable neighborhoods and to allow for development of multifamily housing where it makes sense. We try very hard to work in those directions.
Great. Sarah, I know you've got some answers and thoughts on that, but I want to start by just making certain, as we promised before, in case you're newer to this process, RNOs stand for Registered Neighborhood Organizations. And Sarah, can you explain a little bit about their role and also any response you have to these recommendations? And then we will go to Joan.
Yeah, so registered neighborhood organizations exist across the entire city of Denver. There's some that cover the whole city. There's some that are certain areas or certain neighborhoods. So we have quite a variety, and they're registered through the city. One role that RNOs play with the rezoning process is that when an application comes in, so a rezoning application request, and it turns into a formal application, we send out notifications. And RNOs are included in part of that notification process. So we'll send out notifications to RNOs, as well as the city council members that are within that district of the rezoning, the property that's going to get rezoned. And then we also send notifications out to property owners or properties within a certain boundary of a rezoning. So RNOs are there, they get these notifications about rezonings and can be more aware about what's going on with rezonings as well.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Joan? Sabrina, Joan may still be muted.
Yeah, Joan.
Oh,
Yeah.
I got it.
There you go.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to agree with one of the participants that said that climate change right now should be the first thing that we're thinking of, because if we don't take care of that, all the rest of this will be null and void. So I do think we need to look at zoning in the diagram is saying, you know, what is going to cause the least amount of a climate footprint? You know, is it wise to be building something that is going to be causing more climate change problems? I do empathize with Judy, who said about the rhino diversity and how difficult it is to get the word out for neighbor RNO meetings right now. Our RNO uses only Facebook, which is a real deterrent for older people in the neighborhood or people who may not speak the language to actually use a Zoom meeting for or Facebook notifications. But one of my big requests for zoning and looking at changing rezoning and things like that is the area of town that I live on. I live right along Federal and I-70, and it just seems like we are getting more and more gas stations and fast food permits to be built along there. We know those are not healthy overall for our neighborhood or for our community. And I really wish they would start looking at that when they give out those permits. Right now, I know there's right at I-70 and Federal where there's a Jenny's Market, they're thinking of putting in another fast food restaurant. We do not have a grocery store in this neighborhood, but yet you're willing to give a permit for fast food. That's my soapbox. Thanks.
Thanks, Joan. And I know there were other people who are saying climate as well. Sarah, do you want to talk any about how climate comes into some of the city's overall comprehensive plans and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to, you know, at the beginning of the presentation when we were mentioning the comprehensive plan and blueprint in Denver. And there's a lot of citywide goals that wrap in kind of that concern of climate change and where the city is headed as well. And we have other departments that are solely focused on that as well. So it's definitely a concern of ours. It's something that we're considering. With the rezoning process itself, it's maybe a little bit farther down on the totem pole in terms of what it can do for climate change. So we need to, I think, rely a little more heavily on our plans and other initiatives that we're doing as well. But with this project, we'll consider, you know, the issues that we're hearing and see, you know, what we can do to address them.
Great. And final question from Mariana.
Hi, everybody. I'm a real advocate for our homeless individuals. We in Denver are experiencing both a housing crisis and a homelessness crisis. Now, why is it so difficult for us to have tiny homes in every single councilperson's district? Now, Austin, Texas has that. Seattle, Washington has that. I know for a fact that Robin Kniech, and I think it was Paul Cashman a couple years back, went to Austin to study that. Now, our only little tiny home village run by CBC, it has been moved now, twice. This is an atrocity. I mean, why can't we, you know, why can't city council and a zoning committee make sure that we address this? Nobody wants to see tents. We sweep the people, we traumatically displace them, we treat them, you know, we treat them worse than animals. We need housing, and shelters is not, you know, shelters is not the solution. I was unhoused, I was in a shelter, I suffer PTSD from a shelter, I was sexually assaulted in a shelter, okay? So with that, so I've got not only lived experience, but we need tiny homes in every single district.
Mariana, thank you for your concern and also being willing to share a part of your story. And Sarah, I think Andrew's willing to take this question. Should we have Andrew give you a break for a second? And Andrew, can you talk some about rezoning and tiny homes?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that actually as a land use, tiny homes are allowed in almost any place in Denver, both short term and permanently, provided they meet certain requirements. I think the bigger challenge, and this is definitely outside the purview of this project, but the bigger challenge, and I think that the city is actively working on this, is funding the construction of tiny home villages and finding places for them and that sort of thing. But I do know that city council members and host and others are actively working on trying to stand up more tiny home villages and safe outdoor spaces and other similar approaches to serve as kind of a first stop for people exiting homelessness.
Thanks, Andrew. So hopefully we'll see more rezonings happening that people want to do tiny homes. It sounds like it's allowed. We're going to go one more question from David. So David?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So actually, I just wanted a clarification on that from Andrew. So you'd said that as it stands, tiny homes are allowed all over the city, but like, I don't know, 80% of our land that's zoned for residential structures is single family zoning. Are you saying that you can build tiny homes in a single family zoned lot? And if not, what are the zones where you, like, for those of us who do know our way around the zoning code?
Sure, yeah. No, on a single family zone lot, you can only build typically one dwelling unit, in some cases up to two. So a village of tiny homes would be allowed on any zone district where multiple dwelling units are allowed. So those zone districts that allow things like apartment buildings and that sort of thing. So you couldn't build multiple tiny homes on one single unit lot right now. That is true.
I think that
I'd be more than happy to maybe set up a time to talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to distract from the key focus of this project, but there certainly are a lot of nuances there that I'd be happy to talk to about with you in more detail.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And I know we have some additional questions happening. If you wouldn't mind putting them in the Q&A, either the staff will get to them now or we will answer them also online. This is a great start of a conversation. We do want to go over some of the additional goals that are underway and get your feedback on those as well tonight. So again, the Q&A function is at the bottom of your screen. As staff see those questions, they will answer them as quickly as they can. If we don't have answers tonight, we will answer them as we post materials online. So Sarah, let's talk to us about the goals. Now that we have covered the high level themes, and the issues, let's go to the goals.
Perfect, thank you so much. And thank you guys for that great discussion, and keep sending us your questions as well through the chat. So we talked a little bit about the issue identification. So what's going on, what should we be solving for? And now we're going to transition a little bit and talk about what are the draft goals? What is something we should be achieving with this project? So our team went through feedback related to issues and concerns that we've heard so far again, and we developed some initial goals and objectives that the project should achieve. So to start, as I mentioned earlier, the project will focus on 3 initial goals. I think I've stated them, I'll restate them in a minute. And these 3 overarching goals set the framework for the project. And then the original goals will be listed at the top of the slide, and beneath it, we developed what we're calling objectives for that goal. So the objectives should achieve specific outcomes of the goal. I'll read through the draft goals and objectives that we have identified so far based on the feedback. And then we also want to hear your thoughts on them, and we'll do a similar survey exercise as well. So first, the first goal is to have a rezoning process that is transparent, equitable, and accessible for all. And then the first objective below that to achieve the goal is to customize rezoning materials and notifications, especially to address the language needs of the community and to adapt to the scale and impact of the rezoning. The second objective is to, in general, improve public awareness and input opportunities. The third objective is to tailor community engagement depending on the type and size of rezoning. The fourth objective is to identify how community feedback is used throughout the decision-making process. So that goes back to a little bit of what was discussed earlier through the questions as well. How is feedback going to be used? So we need to identify that. And then the fifth objective is to reduce barriers for rezonings that are small in scale. So that was the first goal and its objectives. The second goal is to have rezoning review criteria that inform better decisions and achieve citywide goals, including goals related to equity. The first objective to achieve that goal is to update the review criteria so that they are clear and understandable. And then the second objective is to ensure the review criteria continue to contribute to achieving the city's goals. And then finally, the third goal is to have rezoning requirements that respond to the varied equity impacts of rezonings. The first objective to achieve that goal is to create a process for evaluating equity impacts of rezonings. And then in addition to that, to look at incorporating tools such as an equity analysis into the rezoning process itself. And the third objective is to create consistent and predictable ways for applicants to commit to certain outcomes. So that was a very quick summary of the draft goals and objectives. So again, we'd like to ask you a few questions through a survey using Mentimeter.
Okay, and the first thing that we're going to do on Mentimeter is do a word poll, a Wordle, so that we get some common themes from you. And we're going to go to Mentimeter, it's menti.com, and you're going to use the code 66293204. So if you can see that on your screen, and I will repeat it again a couple of times. And since this is going to be a visual of the top words, we're asking you to put in 1 or 2 words. So that we can get a visual of the top themes, and then we'll have an opportunity in just a minute for you to answer in a whole lot more words. So again, it's menti.com, and then we'll use the code 66293204. And so if you're there and want to go ahead and start doing some answers, that would be awesome. That way we'll know that it's working. Desegregation, speedy up zoning, increased tiny homes, missing middle housing, unprivileged.
And while these come in, Sarah, we got a question in Q&A asking to show goal 2 again. So could you just read that for the group?
Yes, all right, so goal 2 was rezoning review criteria that inform better decisions and achieve citywide goals, including goals related to equity. So it's about the review criteria. So there's 5 review criteria right now that are used to evaluate a rezoning request. So the first objective to achieve that goal was to update the review criteria so that they are clear and understandable. And the second was to ensure that the review criteria contribute to achieving the city's goals.
All right, we'll give you about another 30 seconds on the Wordle, and then we'll go to some open-ended questions. I'm seeing equity show up right in the center, affordable housing, accessibility, denser housing, climate change. council initiated, lower land values, increased affordability. Fabulous. Okay, Sarah, let's go to the next slide then. I think that'll stay open. We're just moving on in the slide. So when you think about the goals and objectives to address, is there anything we missed? Success criteria, that's correct. We haven't addressed success criteria, but we will be through this. Parking maximums and transportation. Be careful with your equity criteria. Think about how it's been used in ways that have been helpful and not helpful. Community engagement. How do we do that even better? Missing middle for housing. Measure success by how much it lowers time to get housing built. So a lot of things that are applying to zoning as well as rezoning. And where that's the case, the CPD staff can move that to their other team members as well. And everything that we can include in rezoning, we will as well. Get people out of the cars, save the planet, climate. Watching an approval on ADU by a BIPOC person, it was denied. Making certain that if something is denied, do people understand why and that it's not because of discrimination or historical discrimination? Neighborhood and plans are important to implement. So we're going to give you a few more minutes to keep filling this out, and then we will move to questions again and some discussion. Okay, it looks like we're slowing down in terms of answers, so we'll give you about one more minute. This is super helpful for the task force, so thank you all so much for giving a lot of good input tonight. In terms of access to language services, anyone who needs access to language services, the city is more than happy to provide that. We do need people to register in advance when you register for the meeting, to indicate translation services you need, and we would do it both in verbally and in writing. So
Yeah,
apologies if we missed someone on that tonight.
Yeah, so we usually have the request for language access to be on our webpage when we advertise for things like community meetings, as well as in our flyers and things like that. And then after this meeting, we'll post all of the materials, and we'll also be translating all the materials into Spanish as well. And we'll have that on the webpage, including the surveys like this.
Okay, thank you so much for your input here. We're going to go to questions. And so if you want to come off a screen share, we'll start by promoting Robert. I know you had a question in the last group too. So let's go to you first and promote you to have your question answered. And if there's other hands, we'll go to those next. And then we can always come back to questions that are in Q&A as well. So Robert.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks. So my name is Robert. I'm an eviction defense attorney. I do a lot of stuff on housing advocacy here in town. So I unfortunately couldn't make the first part of the meeting, so I may have missed this, but is there a plan to diminish the influence of like powerful neighborhood associations that have historically been able to keep their neighborhoods segregated and exclusive by blocking development in their areas?
Sarah?
That's a complex question. So thank you so much for asking that. I think that's definitely a concern that we've been hearing. Part of that goes a little bit broader beyond sort of what this project can achieve. So when we're talking about maybe if it's notification RNOs or things like that, we're still defining some of the parameters of the project, but looking at how community input is used, looking at who's becoming, who's part of the process now and who should be part of the process in the future. That's something that we want to analyze through this project as well. So understanding when we talk about, we want the process to be more transparent and equitable, we're going to be looking at who should be involved, what voices do we need to hear from, how is it inequitable today, and then move forward with recommendations that will hopefully address some of the concerns that you have around that.
So Sarah, also in the chat, there's questions about in that reviewing, will we also be thinking about negative impacts as well? And how might we be thinking about that in the review criteria? Do we know yet, or is that just part of what the task force needs to work on?
Yeah, I think that's something that we'll evaluate as part of this project. So I think it's good feedback to have in terms of that's an issue or that's something that we need to be looking at as well, if I understand the question correctly.
Great. Are there other questions? There was a question earlier in the Q&A section of how we thought about how might we include more younger people and more BIPOC communities. So can you talk, Sarah, about some of what we're trying to do there?
In terms of including people in the rezoning process, that's exactly, I think, what we're looking at in terms of making sure that the process is equitable and that those that want to be a part of the rezoning process or have or want to even rezone themselves, we want to make sure that there's equitable opportunities for people to be involved. In terms of our project process, we did what we could to make sure that we have a diverse task force and that we're advertising for this project as well, but we're also looking for if there's other ways that we can do better in terms of our outreach engagement or other groups that we should include. We encourage you to reach out to us and or help us reach out to them as well. So we'll be interested if you have other ways that we could improve our engagement.
And so I know there's some questions in the Q&A too in reference to some of the work in some of the Nest neighborhoods, which I'll have a staff define in just a second what Nest neighborhoods are. But we have had folks from Nest both come and talk to the task force about their work, as well as having representatives from those organizations, and have specific focus group outreach that we are working on with representatives from Nest, including folks like Nola, who's referenced in the Q&A, to help us recruit people for the focus groups. So Sarah, anything else you would like to, can you define Nest and what Nest is and who some of the folks are that are referenced as well? So there were questions about folks like Nola.
Yeah, so Nest is a neighborhood equity and stabilization team, and maybe we could send along that resource as well. So that is sort of a subgroup of one of our departments, I only know acronyms at this point, so Dito, once I find the information, we can send that to you guys as well. So we have Nest, and there's certain neighborhoods that we're looking at in terms of looking at how we can have certain programs or initiatives and help those communities in a way. I'll say if you want to learn a little bit more, I would go to our task force meeting number 2 recording. So we have all of the task force meetings recorded online. At that task force meeting, we did invite city staff from that group to give a presentation about the work that they're doing and how they're addressing equity, as well as getting a perspective from the mayor and community planning and development. And then in terms of some of the people that were specifically referenced, Alfonso is actually on our task force as well. And I know Nola is probably aware of this project. And then I might point it to Liz if she has anything to add in terms of involvement from people in Nest neighborhoods, or when it's talking about the question about the approach to community planning and things like that.
Sure. Thanks for that, Sarah. And I think, Alana, you're raising a very important question, and we certainly do have some of that representation on our task force, and we're looking in some of our focus groups to make sure that we're making those connections in those neighborhoods. But a big part of this process will be looking at that piece. Are there are there different processes that we follow in certain neighborhoods that we know are vulnerable? Is there different types of engagement? What are the steps we're taking to make sure that we really have that equitable engagement, and that we're thinking about the impacts that there might be from rezonings in those neighborhoods? So that's certainly a key part of this process, and I'm glad to hear kind of the issues being raised here that we can continue to think about as we work towards what solutions might be.
Great. Any other questions from the group? Folks would like to have your evening back. We are so delighted that you were willing to spend this much time with us. Sarah, can you talk to the group about some additional opportunities for discussion and feedback and next steps?
Yeah, I can do that. I will one last time share my screen. It's a little bit easier so you have something to look at as well instead of just listening to me. So I think I mentioned this, we'll have the meeting recording, we'll have presentation slides and things like that up on our project webpage. Give us about a week or so to get that up there. We're also going to put the community survey on the webpage as well. So it'll be very similar to some of the questions you were asked today. We'll have English and Spanish versions up on the webpage. I mentioned focus groups that are coming up. So there are 3 focus groups we're anticipating to have. Each focus group is aimed to have more of a specific topic to draw people that are interested in talking about that topic or feel like they can contribute to that conversation. So the first focus group is coming up very quick. It's on April 12th from 5 to 6:30. And that is hopefully to frame the conversation around challenges and barriers that people experience as a community member in terms of the rezoning process. The next meeting is on April 13th, similar topic, but looking at what are the challenges and barriers as an applicant and what do you experience through the rezoning process. And then the next meeting is April 12th, which we're hoping to talk about what are some successes, what are opportunities, what are things that maybe are going well in the rezoning process that should be moved forward. So if you'd like to participate in one of those focus groups, you can feel free to fill out the interest form online. So it's on our project webpage and it's a button that says it's an interest form. And within that, you can select which focus group that you would like to be a part of as well. In addition to that, if you know of anyone else that would be interested in potentially a Spanish only focus group or something else that, or something else or someone else that we should be engaging with or in, then again, please reach out to us. And then lastly, a lot of these updates will be coming through our project webpage, www.denvergov.org/equity in rezoning. We'll have a lot of the announcements, the updates, all of the meeting materials on the webpage. And then in addition to that, when we do some of these bigger community meetings, we'll send out newsletters or emails and things like that to spread the word. So that's just a quick summary of the next steps. And then in terms of another community meeting, I would say stay tuned for one to occur hopefully this summer.
Great. Thank you all so very much. We really appreciate your time tonight, and we will be closing out with a little bit of music as we did when we came on. And thank you all for attending, and we'll ask people to go ahead and start dropping off. And I'm going to stop recording now.